Star Trek Picard's controversy about Jean-Luc's mother explained. Star Trek Picard Season 2 dove into the backstory of Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, revealing the tragic story of his mother, Yvette Picard, Madeline Wise. In its second season, Star Trek Picard sent Jean-Luc and his friends into the past to correct changes to the timeline caused by Q, John Delancey. While trapped in the 21st century, Picard revisited his childhood home and confronted the demons of his past. He remembered his father, Maurice Picard, James Callis, as being abusive towards him and his mother. The truth, however, was a bit more complicated. Yvette Picard struggled with her mental health, experiencing mood swings and other symptoms she refused to treat. Maurice tried to help her however he could, which sometimes involved locking her in her room for her own safety. On one of these occasions, a young Jean-Luc unlocked his mother's door, and she later chose to take her own life. Picard blamed himself and repressed these traumatic memories due to his own guilt and the fact that he was so young. Star Trek Picard Season 2 presented this story via the jumbled memories of Jean-Luc as he tried to sort out the truth. The way Star Trek Picard presents Yvette's story is controversial for several reasons. Throughout Star Trek The Next Generation and its subsequent films, Captain Picard maintained that he did not want a family. He focused on his Starfleet career and kept himself at a distance from his crew aboard the USS Enterprise D. Star Trek Picard Season 2 suggested that Picard made this choice because of the father he believed was abusive and his mother's suicide. Yvette's mental health struggles and suicide ultimately became less about her as a character and more about the effect they had on a young Jean-Luc. On the one hand, it's understandable that the story would focus on Jean-Luc's feelings. The show is called Star Trek Picard, after all, but it feels like an odd way to explain Picard's reluctance to let people in, as well as a disservice to Yvette as a character. Considering Picard is now an old man and is remembering experiences he had as a young boy, it's also possible, and even likely, that his memories are not entirely accurate. While this makes sense from a story perspective, it makes it even more difficult to parse out the truth. Maurice and Yvette were both presented as flawed individuals. They rejected the technology and medical advancements of the time, despite the fact that Yvette clearly needed help from medical professionals. As a child, Jean-Luc was particularly close to his mother, and she encouraged his imagination and his fascination with the stars. Jean-Luc did not understand that his mother was sick, so he perceived his father's attempts to help her as abuse. Still, Maurice Picard was clearly in over his head. He may have been desperate and genuinely trying to help, but he still locked his wife in her bedroom and left Jean-Luc alone with her. Because Jean-Luc remembered his father as being abusive, the two did not have much of a relationship as adults. Maurice also opposed his son's decision to join Starfleet, instead wanting him to tend to the family's French vineyard. Jean-Luc remained estranged from his father until the older man's death, and Picard regretted never reaching out. As Jean-Luc realized the truth of his mother's illness, he began to see his father in a different light, although Maurice had been dead for years by the time of Picard Season 2. In the final season of Star Trek Picard, a controversy arose surrounding Jean-Luc Picard's relationship with his mother, Yvette Picard. The show delved deep into Jean-Luc's past, offering a new perspective on his upbringing that surprised and even unsettled longtime fans of the Star Trek franchise. What emerged was a tragic story that altered Jean-Luc's background in ways that many didn't expect. To fully understand the controversy, it's important to look at the portrayal of Jean-Luc's mother in earlier Star Trek series, how Picard reinvented it, and the broader implications for the beloved character. Jean-Luc's mother in The Next Generation in Star Trek The Next Generation TNG, Jean-Luc Picard's childhood is depicted as rather idyllic and traditional, especially in contrast to his own father, Maurice, with whom he had a tense relationship. While there wasn't much focus on Yvette Picard in TNG, she was presented in flashbacks and conversations as a kind and nurturing figure. She was a symbol of warmth in Jean-Luc's early years, someone who played a vital role in shaping his values and moral compass. In the TNG episode Where No One Has Gone Before, for example, Jean-Luc encounters a vision of his mother serving him tea, further solidifying her presence as a comforting figure from his past. For years, fans accepted this version of Yvette Picard without much question. She was never a major character, but she was an essential part of the foundation that made Jean-Luc the disciplined, honorable, and compassionate leader he became. Star Trek: Picard's radical reimagining the controversy begins in Star Trek: Picard Season 2, where the series re-examines Jean-Luc's childhood, particularly focusing on his relationship with Yvette in ways that starkly contrast with TNG. In Picard, Yvette is portrayed as a deeply troubled woman who suffered from severe mental illness. Through a series of flashbacks, it is revealed that she struggled with depression and possibly other undiagnosed mental health issues, which led to a series of traumatic experiences for a young Jean-Luc. The most shocking moment comes when it is revealed that Yvette took her own life, a trauma that Jean-Luc had buried deep within his subconscious. For decades, he had suppressed the memory of finding his mother after her suicide, carrying the emotional scars without fully understanding their origin. This retconning of Jean-Luc's family history sent shockwaves through the fanbase. Suddenly, the idealized image of Yvette Picard from TNG was shattered, replaced by a much darker, more complex, and tragic narrative. Fans who had always seen Jean-Luc as a paragon of stability and control now had to reconcile this with the idea that his calm exterior was, in part, a defense mechanism built to cope with childhood trauma. The backlash, the reimagining of Yvette Picard's character, and the portrayal of mental illness in Picard stirred intense debate among Star Trek fans. Some welcomed the complexity that this added to Jean-Luc's character, arguing that it humanized him further and made him more relatable. After all, Star Trek has always been about exploring the human condition, and dealing with trauma and mental health is a powerful and relevant theme. Others, however, felt that the change was unnecessary and even disrespectful to the legacy of TNG. They argued that the new backstory did not align with the Jean-Luc Picard they had come to know over the course of 7 seasons and 4 feature films. Fans had long admired Picard's emotional intelligence, leadership, and ability to navigate crises with a clear head. The idea that these traits were partly forged by childhood trauma was seen by some as a diminishment of his character, rather than a deepening of it. Critics also took issue with how Yvette's mental illness was portrayed. They felt that the series used her struggle with depression and eventual suicide as a plot device to create drama, without fully exploring the nuances of mental health. This led to accusations that the show mishandled a sensitive issue, turning a once-beloved character into a tragic figure solely to enhance Jean-Luc's emotional arc. Themes of trauma and healing in Picard, despite the controversy, the reimagining of Jean-Luc's past in Star Trek: Picard aligns with the broader themes of trauma and healing that run throughout the series. From the very beginning, Picard has explored the idea that even the most revered leaders can carry deep wounds, and that healing is a lifelong process. In Season 1, Jean-Luc grapples with his guilt over the Romulan crisis and Data's death, and in Season 2, the focus shifts to his unresolved childhood trauma. By confronting these issues head-on, the series pushes Jean-Luc to grow in ways that we hadn't seen in TNG. It offers a more layered depiction of a man who, despite his legendary status, is still fallible and vulnerable. For some, this evolution is a welcome addition to his character, showing that even heroes have to face their inner demons. Conclusion: the controversy surrounding Jean-Luc's mother in Star Trek: Picard speaks to the delicate balance between honoring a beloved character's legacy and pushing the boundaries of storytelling.